Hi, Sarah. I hope you are doing well. I want to present to you my second assignment for the supervision class, the supervision self-assessment. So on my agenda for my presentation today is I'm going to be talking about my strengths and challenges as a supervisor. I'll be talking about strengths and challenges as a supervisee. I will also be talking about the impact of my personal and professional history, my identities, and my personality on my role as a supervisor or a supervisee. I'll also be talking about online supervision reflections and how I think and feel about that use of that technology. So starting off as a supervisor. So my first strength that I'd like to talk about is attunement. Attunement is about being aware of and responding to all of the possibilities and probabilities of what another person is feeling and thinking and experiencing, and being aware of and in touch with what they are doing. I clearly remember what it was like to be a new employee, a new worker, a new social worker, and not feeling secure in my skills or my knowledge, or not knowing where the bathroom was, and all of those things, from the big to the small. Where can I find a pen? Um, what are policies around the HR, and all of those sort of things that come alongside a job and tasks and responsibilities that we do. And and I approaching people with onboarding in a different way, um, being attuned to that and those nerves and how that can feel for someone, especially for people who have maybe been in the field for a long time and are in a new position, all of those sort of things. I also remember what it was like to not feel supported by a supervisor in difficult times. And I want to respond in a different way so that it feels different and better for people, and being in tune to feelings and experiences that people are having, I think, is really important, and is really something that I have skills at doing. I also, in just overall, I can imagine so many different possibilities for what someone is experiencing at all different phases. Because not only have I been there, but I've also been witness to the huge variety of experiences within professional spheres. And I can use my skills of empathy, and so that I can imagine what it's like for someone else, and hopefully can respond to that in a compassionate and professional way. I also believe that I cultivate relationships really well, or can cultivate relationships really well. Schulman in the book highlights that there are three dimensions of the supervisor relationship: the rapport, the trust, and caring. Within rapport, I generally get along with people well, and I tend to get along with a wide variety of people, particularly in professional settings. I think that's a strength. Trust, another element that Schulman highlights. I feel like people can be really open with me and feel really safe with me, and that they can trust me, and that they can be open regarding their work, and that I'll view them in a non-judgmental manner. um, and you know, respond that way to them. Um, Caring is also something that Shulman highlights, and that's for me, it's the genuineness about my desire to see people do well and succeed and be happy and healthy. And I think that can come across when I'm talking with people, that I have this true and honest, genuine caring about them. And I think that that is really important, and that's a strength within being a supervisor. Uh, I think that through these traits, that the foundation can be built upon, through which challenges can be faced and addressed in an open manner, and where supervisees can see that I have their best interest and the client's best interest in mind, and that those things also build a foundation that repair can be made in the event of a rupture. I think that's really important, that people have a true, honest sense that they can trust you and that you care about them, in order so that you can make repair if that is something that you have to do. And unfortunately, it is something that we have to do as supervisors. I also believe that I have a really wide knowledge and skill base that can be used within being a supervisor. This class has given me a significantly more broader sense of what supervision is, and I think that's been really important to me. Previously I thought of supervision as more of a task-based and top-down dynamic, and this class has really expanded my thinking and my thoughts around that, about what supervision is and how one goes about it. This idea is really emphasized for me when Shulman was talking about that there's a concern in the field of social work about being too focused on process or quote, process and targets. And I think that's something that really rings true for me. It will be vital that I help build an environment that supports learning and development, as opposed to one that's so focused on process and targets. And that's something I've really learned through this class. Shulman says that supervision should be an open and supportive, and that it should focus on the quality of decisions, good risk analysis, and improving outcomes rather than meeting targets. And that's something that's going to be really important for me to remember as a supervisor. Also, this class has given me resources that I really appreciate. Things like the initial supervision checklist, the Atkinson's The Racial Development Process method. Those things will be really useful for me. I also have a professional knowledge and skills. I have broad-based professional knowledge and skills. I have significant experience in my field of affordable housing, and it's based upon the knowledge and skills that I've built in 10 years through working in that field. I think that's a significant strength. I also have social work knowledge and skills. Going through the School of Social Work has significantly broadened my knowledge base and my skill base, and I'm really proud of that. My thinking around how to go about my work has shifted based upon some of the things I've learned at the school. I've really started to question the why and the how of many of the ways in which not only I, but also my agency goes about the work that we do. And I think that, I have an example of that for you. at our properties, we have what are called the house rules. And these were long established before I started. And about 6, 7 years ago, I was given the task to update them on an annual basis. And so, I did research and I updated them. And, every year we've sort of responded to issues that have come up. But one thing that we've never done is we've never asked our tenants, the people who live at the buildings, the people who these rules are imposed upon, what they think about them and how they feel about them. And so this year I was able to, and I think that's really wrong. The saying, nothing about us without us, really rings true for me. And how can we impose rules from this top-down place without getting feedback about them? How do they work? Does it make sense to you? Are there things that you don't like? Are there things that don't work? Are there things that you don't understand? And all of those questions are now being posed to our tenants in this process of where we've been able to invite people who live at the buildings to come and join this ongoing conversation about the rules this year. And that's been really great. And I think the knowledge that I've learned, some of the skills that I've learned in social work school really helped me do that. And that's really, I think, the foundational idea about what I'm doing in school for me is I want to bring social work values and ethics and modes of working into my professional life and apply it to affordable housing. And I think that I have strengths to do that. And this class has helped me learn even more about it. So moving on to challenges. Talking too much. Oh my god. So, I've already talked a lot, and you certainly pointed out that I've talked a lot in my supervision video with Rose that you were annotating. Your comments are spot on, and I'm going to be talking a lot in this video, but and now I'm talking too. Anyways, so I need to learn how not to dominate discussions and step back. It's flat out as simple as that. Within supervision, I can see this as being a challenge where I could dominate over a supervisee and not give us enough space or time for them to process or for them to express their needs. And yeah, I really appreciate that you helped point that out to me. And I'll be continuously working on this throughout my career, I think. Leads me into humor. And, I personally have a dynamic and a cutting sense of humor, and it can be perceived as being really mean at times, I think. And, in the gay community, we call it throwing shade. I'm not sure if you've ever heard that term, but we call it throwing shade. And, I really need to take a step back from that dynamic of humor that I have in order to not offend people, and particularly offend supervisees. In social work, it's often said that we need to have a dark sense of humor in order to cope with this. But I think that I'm going to really need to work on balancing that needed dark sense of humor and that end humor as being something I can utilize in really positive ways, with recognizing that I can have a really cutting sense of humor that can be perceived as being pretty mean. So it's something I will have to significantly work on, and watch myself and step back from it and call it out and apologize for it if I see that it hurt someone. So the writing reflex. This is, I'm stealing this from motivational interviewing. I just love this phrase. Uh, I really like to solve problems. I don't think I would be in social work if I didn't like to solve problems, but I absolutely love to be correct. I love, love, love to be correct. And I also love to brainstorm with people about, how can we dig in there and figure this challenge out and solve this problem. And as a supervisor, I don't think that that's always going to be the best way to go about things. I think I'm going to really have to balance it with letting people find their own space and find their own solutions. And because, if someone is finding their own solution, it's more likely that they will follow through with it. That's something that also comes out of motivational interviewing. And it's something I will definitely need to work on and be challenged by as a supervisor. And listening. So this goes back to talking too much, I think. So I oftentimes am finding myself thinking about what I'm going to be saying next, as opposed to hearing what the person that I'm talking with is saying. And that's really a significant issue that I in order to be a good supervisor, I'm going to have to stop myself from thinking and instead listen and hear what people are saying. Um, that's something that is a challenge in many different areas of my life, but as a supervisor, it's going to be really important that I do that and do that work. So as a supervisee, I feel like, I have an openness. I'm open to growing and doing better and learning and working differently, and I'm not shut off by saying, well, this is the way we've always done it. That's something I hear quite a bit and at my work, and I say, well, just because it's the way we've always done it, doesn't mean that we can't do better, and or that we couldn't try something different. And just because we're trying something different doesn't mean that the thing we were doing was bad. So I have this openness. I have an openness to people and thoughts and ideas, and I think that's a real strength. Attunement, again. Attunement shows up in both as a supervisor and a supervisee. So I think as a supervisee, my attunement with a supervisor would be really important, because I can step back and I can see a bigger picture of maybe what they are dealing with and the context of projects and issues and tasks that we're undertaking and the agency, and how are all of these pictures, how are all these pieces of the puzzle fitting together. I'm I am able to do that with my supervisor quite a bit. And I try to step into the mind of my supervisor and see and think and feel, what are they experiencing? What's going on for them? What are their challenges? And how can I work to respond to what they're dealing with, so that it can make their challenges easier or lessen their challenges, or respond in a way in which is beneficial to the agency and the department and coworkers and to my supervisor. I think that's a real strength for me. So supervising challenges. So I think, like so many people, facing difficult conversations without becoming emotionally responsive has been a challenge for me as a supervisee when I've been told, in those really sort of bigger picture issues of, hey, this happened and this was wrong and you shouldn't have done that. And sometimes that can be defensive. And what happens for me is in those moments, I can become really, my executive functioning shuts off. And I have no capacity for emotional regulation. And, I am a person whose response in the fight, flight, or freeze is definitely a fight. And I become very defensive and rigid and stuck in my ways when responding to the way in which some people at some times have approached me about saying, hey, let's do something differently. It's really recognizing the trigger of how I am approached versus what I'm being approached with, and being open about that trigger, I think, is really important for me. And it comes from childhood and all those things, so it's deeply ingrained, just like so many traumatic responses are. And so this is gonna, I don't know how you're going to think or feel about this. So being too smart for my own good. So I have been told by my supervisor on several occasions that, Matthew, everyone already knows that you are the smartest one in the room. You don't need to prove it to people. And what she is, and we've had deeper conversations about it than just that comment. And what she's meant by this is that I can sometimes behave in an aggressive manner when I'm trying to prove a point or defend myself, or again, I know where this comes from for me, and it's something that I work on in the appropriate venues, and there are several things that I do to help me with this. And I really try to stop myself in the moment, recognize what's occurring, and I have to ask myself a couple of questions, and I say, is this really necessary? How am I coming across to people? Is that the way that I want to come across to people? And is this helpful? And so often those really help bring me back down and say, that's not helpful. The way that you're behaving is not helpful to your relationships with your peers and coworkers. So it's and your supervisor. And so it's things I've worked on, and I've certainly lessened to a significant degree how many times I respond or what I respond to. So I'm thankful for those, but those are ongoing challenges that I have as a person and a supervisee. So what are the impacts of personal and professional history, identity, and personality on my role as a supervisor or supervisee? So, impact. Personal history. As I was just discussing, I have experiences of trauma. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. I've experienced trauma from being bullied and ostracized as a kid for being gay, and it really led to my coping of using food to cope with it, which then also further alienated me from my peers as someone who became overweight. Um, and, you know, going through that as a teenager and the several things that came alongside that, um, you know, I really, I learned the value and importance of empathy on such a deep and personal level, and how, I mean, literally empathy saved my life. And and I learned the importance of it. And so because of those experiences, I have learned how to have empathy for others. And I think that this can be utilized in supervision and in my professional life. Um, you know, and that I can use it to provide space for supervisees to be actual human beings and not just the professional expectation or the tasks that they're doing, or, you know, their title at work. That they can be true full humans, and with lives outside of work and experiences before coming to that place of employment, you know, and that people have challenges and have experienced trauma, and I can um, engage with them in a trauma informed manner as a supervisor. And, you know, how can, so that leads me to ask myself, how can I be trauma informed in my supervision? How can I utilize the 4 R's, as Mandy calls them, as opposed to what the podcast referred to them as the 3 R's? So the 4 R's: the recognizing, the realizing, the responding, and the avoiding re-traumatization of trauma informed, um, and how I can use that. You know, the ideas from the Trauma Informed Supervision podcast were phenomenal, and I really appreciated them. You know, such as the telling someone what I'm going to do before I do it. You know, today I'd like to talk about XYZ. You know, in our supervision today, we're going to cover this case, this case. We have some paperwork to do, and the paperwork is this. I think that that can be really impactful, and it's really small ways. And my personal history of experienced trauma and my knowledge of trauma informed, I think, can really inform how I behave as a supervisor in that way. You know, and I can also use it in terms of talking to supervisees about, and coworkers and supervisors, because I do that as well, you know, about self-care and secondary traumatization and vicarious trauma and burnout, and how we can respond to all of those things in a professional and personal way to benefit the work that we're doing. So yeah, professional history. Being in one field, the affordable housing industry, for almost 10 years, you know, it has me a little bit scared about being too rigid in my thinking. And, you know, and so that's why I'm happy about the strength that I have about being open. And so, you know, my professional history is leading me to think about what can I do to break out of the box of the thinking that I currently have about how affordable housing should be managed and how it should operate and how people should interact with each other, you know. It's one reason that I'm really so excited to be in my placement this year at Home Forward, because it's someplace that's affordable housing that is different than my employment, and I'll be able to experience another way of doing the same work, and that I can challenge myself to use my strength of being of openness uh, to that new and different setting. I'm very excited about that, and how I can use that um, as a supervisor. So identities, I have, I have several privileged identities. I'm white. I'm male. I have a high level of education. I have and was raised, I am currently and was raised in the middle class or upper middle class. And I currently do not have any mental or physical disabilities, and there are so many other identities that I hold that are privileged. And I bring all of those to the table, and I need to be open about them. And I need to invite conversations about privilege and oppression with my supervisees and my coworkers. And I I feel like I have some real strengths in being able to do that. You know, the and this class has really given me, I think, some more tools in which how to do that. I think about the multicultural supervision video that we watched, that asked that we approach conversations around identity, and we err on the safe side, and we have these conversations gently. Um, and the video presented several ideas to us about how to have these conversations, such as asking us, how do we identify? What does that mean? Uh, what do supervisees think and feel about how they identify, how they are perceived? Um, how do supervisees see themselves? How do they present in social situations, professional situations, or familial situations? And are those different based upon their identities and the identities of the others that they're interacting with? Um, what are our own personal biases about our and other people's identities? What are other people's potential biases about us? How does that impact our work? How do all of these things weave together? And uh, including in all of that, what about intersectionality? You know, thinking about all of those things together really is going to be impactful about the work that I do, um, because I do hold so many identities that are of the dominant culture. And how can I approach my work while holding those identities to be to utilize anti-oppressive practices? What can I do? How can I be? How can I work with other people? How can I use that in the parallel process of supervision? These are all things that are swirling around in my head, all about identities, as a supervisor and being a supervisor. Moving on, personality. So, previously I mentioned my sense of humor as being a possible challenge and needing to measure that. So I won't go further into that. However, I will talk about how my overall personality uh, tends to be centered around being optimistic and being outgoing. Um, so talking about optimism. So in thinking about being an optimistic person, in general, I think it's a really phenomenal trait to have and possess, because it allows me to look for strengths and find the goodness in people, and to see, what people term weaknesses or faults, uh, as, and I tend to think of them as challenges, and that like challenges can be exciting to me. Um, you know, and I see them as challenges rather than a failure, or a setback, or those. It, yeah. Within supervision, being optimistic can be, I think, can be used to great effect in order to rally supervisees to face those challenges and see the strengths in supervisees and the group and facing those challenges together. I think that optimism can really help me do that. I do see a flip side to that coin, whereas some people can perceive and do perceive that being optimistic is not facing reality. Um, we have some really very real negative and dangerous and scary realities that we're facing in social work. And I know that some people can view people who are optimistic as not being based in reality or having rose-colored glasses on. And I, as a supervisor, am going to need to be aware of that and be challenged by that. I'm using challenge a lot. Um, and when I approach situations and supervisees, and just to be in tune with that idea that some people can view optimism as rose-colored glasses and respond to it as necessary. So with being an outgoing person, that can sometimes overwhelm people. I have been told at times that that people can be intimidated by me. Yeah. Um, and I need to continue to be conscious of that fact, and attune to that for others, so that I can respond more appropriately if I'm if that's the case with others, in order to not really scare them, because that's probably not good as a supervisor, to scare your supervisees. So online supervision, you know, I have some apprehension about online supervision. I have apprehension about being able to create meaningful connection over a webcam or a phone call. Um, I know that when talking on I really don't like talking on the phone, and so when talking on the phone, there's that just momentary pause or delay. It's really hard sometimes to read if people are pausing because they're pausing, or if there's a cutout in the phone. Like, all of those sort of things just make me apprehensive about supervision online. You know, as Shulman talks about, the rapport and the care and trust are so important. And I think to myself, how can I possibly engage people in that, without being fully in their presence? And these are questions that I'm asking myself about that. I think that through my experience with the dyad with Rose, I overcame quite a bit of that apprehension in regards to that with her. And so I think that that apprehension is lessened, but I still have concerns about that, which I think witnessing is really maybe one of those major concerns. And I'll tell you what I mean by witnessing. I really wonder how it is possible to truly witness someone's work without seeing them interact with clients. And I think that this is probably the same case for um, supervision that isn't online, but online supervision seems to perhaps have a bigger challenge in that way, bigger barrier in that way. You know, at my DHS, my internship last year in child welfare, there were so many opportunities for my supervisor to be witness firsthand my interactions with clients. And, you know, either in the car or in the living room or at the DHS office, you know, in the supervision room or behind the glass. And I think that's really incredibly valuable to witness the work that a supervisee does, not just hear reports about what they did. And so I do wonder, and this really is a lot of where my apprehension comes from, I think, is I do wonder how honest secondhand reporting by a supervisor could be. And not that I expect a supervisee to be dishonest on purpose, but I think that I do know that, you know, reality can be subjective, and um, relating or retelling someone's own experiences, it may not always be the most accurate description of what occurred, and so that's something that really concerns me about online supervision, that firsthand witnessing interactions. And yeah, moving on, opportunity. So nonetheless, I am excited about the opportunity of online supervision. I think that the use of technology has dramatically changed our world and how we communicate and how we interact with people and how we get news and how we function, you know, on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, I'm really excited about that opportunity that technology brings to our abilities to connect with other people in really intimate possible ways and personal ways in real time. You know, Rose and I were able to meet together, and someone I would have probably never met in my entire life be able to converse through this use of technology. And I think that's an incredibly exciting opportunity. So that really concludes my self-assessment, and I just want to thank you for this class. It was great. I really appreciated the very thoroughness and thoughtfulness of how this class was run. And I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk for I don't know how long at this point. So I'm going to let you go and hope that you have a lovely morning, evening, day, weekend, whenever you end up watching this. Thank you. Bye.